I asked what more, and then I saw. A poem about the past and future by Mill Williams. I asked today what more was needed, what more I needed to do. And I realized it's the wrong question, quite the wrong one. Because when all is done and said, and everyone seems now to be scratching their heads, in fact, what they wanted all along was never to sing, but be sung. There's nothing more I want of here, and everything I want of there, and still I can, and still I shall, attempt to make a bit of a Mancunian well, where pebbles may fall, and sounding not at all, for ages and ages, even so make a final splash, and allow me to give something back to the country and people who are so savagely bullying that it's hardly surprising their grand legacy is called Brexit. But even when I recognise this fact, and even when it's all said and done, and even when in the UK fun is just about as prevalent as the sun in parts of the world where when they hate your guts, even garters ain't yours to have without them sticking their fingers in your eyes. So the bridge of sighs becomes the abusive bridge of signs in a place where mafias are invisible. Only because nothing ain't some kind of mafia. Didn't you know? And so that's all I need to say. My experiences on both sides of that sea have been for me quite enough, and quite the same, involving and invoking cruel and stupid men who could have been people to be publicly proud of, and instead are people who privately sound off without ever taking ownership for the gaslighting they commit. Hiding as they do in the tribe that means if you're in, you're a lout, everyone treasures, and if you're out, you're the only brave one they will ever see in their lifetimes. And this is when I asked once more, and this is when what I asked I saw. Before the lazy slob who considers himself so cool, actually in slovenly manner, befitting his kind of gruel, and coming from that old school, so very redolent of the fallen wounded, you'd think they'd express compassion like a mother with a child and their milk, when instead the value of woman for them never existed, because the women they live with are not to be treasured, but beaten so awful, as if carpets trod regularly underfoot, and only sometimes taken and shaken in order to deliver some sooty craven. Because for this sort of man, the only thing he knows is how to enforce his will, as if it's good and always goes, when in truth this man and his pals know only how to live in hell and perpetuate it for the object of their ire, and aspire only to the dirty of Auden's novelist, where hatred bursts out like an explosion of pus-ridden lust. And so ultimately for me, this is my homeland. And ultimately for me, this is why I may no longer work here. And ultimately, I tell you, what's really what I missed all this time was the opportunity to rhyme something good about the men who should make up bravely and fine this thing we call brotherhood and fatherhood and cousinhood and all and all and all and all and all. And so you do see what I mean. And so of course you do. And so when in fact the only thing in gross reality they're capable of making up without equally gross finality are the lies and rank dishonesties of their tiny little crimes, which their tiny little minds do so enjoin our neighbourhoods to participate falsely in. It's cool, you know, to know them so, These men of tribe and winsome smile, who grin out of hatred and depose out of love for the beginning and the end. That is the fallacy of brutes, the brutes of Britain, who will never win the day, because all they can ever say is, "Hello, love, give us a kiss," as they miss the whole goddamn point. Because when they do, and when they presume, and when they assume it's right to demand, all I can say is I'm ashamed on 2 counts. To be a man brought up like so many others in the UK today, and to be a wider Brit of smallest silly mind, which is all I can now think, is all I must now get away from. Why my place is no longer here, and so wherever it might one day become, at least I won't be sitting on my backside in some parochial park where only the idiots line up their beamers, as finally and totally their sociopathic easing repeats and repeats unceasingly their fleecing of all sensible community and true life lived, as they prefer to beat the wife before night reaches another fleeting glimmer of what it could all have been, if only the purposeful had even just once reigned in the British Isles of foolish signals and trivial spies.